No one noticed the young woman at the far end of the dining room. Not the maitre d', not the waiters gliding between white linen tables, not even the man whose name crowned the building. They were too busy pretending not to see the girl sitting by the window, the billionaire's blind daughter, forgotten in plain sight. Her name was Lily Hale, 23, pale hair pulled into a soft braid, fingertips resting on the rim of an untouched glass of water. She had been waiting nearly 40 minutes for someone to guide her to the restroom, but every time she turned her head, staff scattered like wind-tossed leaves. They weren't cruel, just trained by neglect. To them, she was the quiet inconvenience in a corner booth, a symbol they served, not a person they helped. Across the room, Danielle Parker balanced a tray of coffee cups for a nearby table. She wasn't supposed to be here. She worked downstairs, part-time barista, part-time nursing student pulling double shifts because her rent was a coin toss away from eviction. But when she saw Lily lift her hand slightly and whisper, "Excuse me, hello?" and no one answered, something inside Danielle froze. She set the tray down, ignored the disapproving glance from her shift lead, and crossed the floor. "Miss Hale?" she said softly. Lily turned her head, surprised but calm. "Yes? Do you need help finding the restroom?" Relief fluttered across Lily's face. "I hate asking twice. They pretend not to hear." "I heard," Danielle replied. "That's enough for me," she offered her arm. Lily hesitated, then smiled faintly and took it. It was a small gesture, unremarkable to most. But 3 tables away, Megan Clark, the restaurant's front office supervisor, caught the sight and frowned. That girl again? She thought, the one from downstairs who doesn't know her place. By the time Danielle returned Lily safely to her father's table, whispers had already begun. Richard Hale, silver-haired, tall, commanding even at 70, had been speaking with 2 investors when Danielle guided his daughter back. He paused mid-sentence. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" Lily nodded. Thanks to her. Richard's gaze moved to Danielle. There was gratitude in his eyes, but also confusion. He didn't recognize her uniform. "Which department are you from?" he asked. "Coffee bar, sir," Richard blinked. "Downstairs? You're not staff for the main dining room." "No, sir," she admitted, "but your daughter needed help." For a second, the air felt delicate, balanced between thanks and reprimand. Then Richard nodded once. "Appreciated." It could have ended there. But when Danielle turned to leave, Megan stepped forward with the brittle smile of authority. "Parker, isn't it? You've got no clearance to serve on this floor," she said, voice sharp enough for guests to hear. Danielle stiffened. "I wasn't serving, ma'am. That's not the point," Megan interrupted. "You abandoned your post. We run a luxury brand here. Guests notice when staff wander where they don't belong." Guests noticed, all right, every one of them heard the humiliation. Lily's brows knitted. She was helping me. But Megan talked right over her. "Next time, let trained personnel handle it." "Trained to ignore me?" Lily asked quietly. The table went silent. Even Richard stopped breathing for half a second. Megan swallowed, tried to laugh it off. "Of course not, Miss Hale, enough." Richard's tone was mild, but it carried weight. "We'll discuss it later." Danielle nodded quickly, trying to disappear. But as she walked away, Lily called after her. "What's your name?" "Danielle," she said. "Thank you, Danielle." And the way Lily said it, steady, unshaken, drew every eye back to the truth of what had just happened. That night, word traveled faster than any press release. The billionaire's daughter had been ignored by his own staff, and only a part-time worker had shown kindness. Inside corporate chat groups, it was whispered as the dining room slip. Outside, no one cared yet, not until the next morning. At 7:30, Danielle arrived early, hoping to avoid attention. Instead, she found Ethan Boyd, the restaurant manager, waiting near the lockers. "Danielle Parker?" "Yes, sir." "Ms. Clark reported a procedural breach. You left your station during peak hours." "I helped a guest in distress." "I understand," he said flatly. "But hierarchy exists for a reason." He handed her a warning form. "Sign this." She read the paper twice. Unauthorized floor movement. Customer area interference. Insubordination. Her stomach sank. "Sir, this isn't fair," Ethan sighed. "Fair doesn't keep shifts running. Just sign it, keep your job." Danielle's pen shook as she wrote her name. When she left the office, Megan was waiting outside, arms folded, satisfaction plain on her face. "Next time, heroics will cost you more than ink," she said. Danielle didn't answer. She just walked past her, slow, steady, refusing to give the woman another victory. Across town, Richard Hale was having a different morning. He sat in his penthouse study overlooking Lake Michigan. Phone pressed to his ear as Chloe Hartman, his publicist, rattled off headlines from overnight gossip blogs. "Minor story for now," Chloe said, "but if a diner recorded the exchange, it could spin." Richard frowned. "It was nothing." "Nothing becomes something when your name's worth $8 billion, she replied. He glanced toward Lily, who sat on the sofa feeding crumbs to her guide dog. "Was anyone filming?" "Unconfirmed. But social media doesn't sleep, Richard. I suggest you address it before someone else frames it." He ended the call without replying. Moments later, Lily spoke softly. "Dad, you're not angry at her, are you?" "At who?" "The woman who helped me." "No," he said. "Just angry that others didn't." At lunch hour, Danielle was wiping counters when the elevator doors opened and silence rolled through the cafe. Two men in tailored suits stepped out, followed by a third, Derek Vaughn, head of security, broad-shouldered, expression unreadable. "Danielle Parker?" Her heart jumped. "Yes?" "Mr. Hale would like to see you upstairs." Every barista froze mid-pour. Megan, standing near the pastry case, smirked. Oh, she's in trouble now. But Derek's tone carried no menace. Only authority. Danielle followed them to the executive floor, pulse pounding. She expected interrogation. Instead, she found herself outside the glass doors of the Hale private suite. Inside waited Lily, smiling. "You came," Lily said. Danielle blinked. "I was told to." "Dad wanted to thank you personally." Richard stood by the window, back to them. "Miss Parker," he said without turning. "Do you know why you're here?" "I assumed it was about yesterday," she said carefully. "It is. I reviewed the footage." Her heart stopped. "There was footage." "There's always footage," he said. "Security cameras. They showed who helped and who didn't." He finally faced her. "You were the only one who acted like a human being." Danielle opened her mouth, but no words came. Richard continued. "My daughter tells me you're studying nursing?" "Yes, sir, nights." "And working 2 jobs?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "Tell me something, Miss Parker. If kindness cost you a job, do you still think it's worth it?" She met his gaze. "Yes, because if I stop being me." For a long moment, Richard said nothing. Then he smiled a rare, genuine smile. "Honest answer," he murmured. "I like that." He turned to Lily. "What do you think?" Lily grinned. "Hire her." Danielle's eyes widened. "Sir?" Richard gestured toward the empty chair beside his daughter. "She needs a personal aide. Someone patient. Someone who doesn't pretend not to hear." "I can't accept that." "You can and you will," he interrupted gently. "It's a paid position, full benefits, flexible hours to finish your degree." Lily added quietly, "And I'd rather have you than anyone else." Danielle felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you, Miss Hale." When she left the office, Megan was waiting at the elevator again, only this time, her smirk had vanished. Word travels fast in tall buildings. By the time Danielle reached the lobby, everyone already knew. That night, she called her best friend Tasha Miller. "You're telling me the billionaire offered you a job?" Tasha shouted over the phone. "Not just a job, a position," Danielle said. "Personal aide for his daughter. Girl, that's a blessing wrapped in gold foil." "I don't know, it feels unreal." "Unreal doesn't mean wrong. Maybe God finally decided you've earned a break." Danielle smiled, though exhaustion tugged at her bones. "Let's hope so." Outside her apartment window, Chicago's skyline glowed like a promise she wasn't sure she could trust. But for the first time in years, she went to sleep thinking about a future instead of a deadline. 2 weeks later, everything changed again. Danielle's new role came with prestige and enemies. Megan Clark had been transferred to the upper floor operations team, which meant daily proximity. And if envy had a scent, it trailed Danielle everywhere. Lily's first public outing since hiring her a charity luncheon at a downtown artsy institute, Danielle learned how quickly kindness turns political. The ballroom shimmered with designer gowns and practiced smiles. Photographers buzzed near the red carpet entrance. Lily, radiant in soft blue, clutched Danielle's arm lightly. "You ready?" Danielle whispered. "I'm the one who's supposed to ask that," Lily teased. "You're trembling." They stepped inside, and once again the crowd pretended not to see. But this time Danielle saw everything. The forced politeness, the whispered comments about the new girl, the subtle segregation of attention. When Lily reached for a glass and accidentally brushed one off the table, crystal shattered. Cameras clicked instantly, not to help, but to capture. And Danielle, without hesitation, knelt, picked up the shards, and said loud enough for every microphone to hear, "Accidents happen. Grace is how we handle them." The room quieted. Richard Hale, watching from across the floor, didn't intervene. He wanted to see who she really was under pressure. He didn't expect to feel pride, because that single sentence, spoken by a woman everyone once ignored, would ignite something deeper than gratitude. It would begin the story of how an African woman with nothing but empathy in her hands caught the heart of a man who thought he'd seen everything. The days that followed the luncheon carried a strange kind of silence, too polite to be comfortable, too heavy to be ignored. Inside the Hale mansion, everything gleamed. Polished oak floors, mirrored elevators, marble counters. But beneath that perfection, Danielle could feel the undercurrent. Some people smiled when she passed. Others watched, whispering the moment her back turned. At first, she told herself it didn't matter. She was here to care for Lily, not to win anyone's approval. But approval, in a house that ran like a corporation, was currency. And Danielle was still broke. Each morning began with the same rhythm. She'd help Lily dress, prepare her reading materials in Braille, and guide her through therapy sessions designed to strengthen her spatial awareness. Lily was bright, funny too, and quick to pick up on moods. "They don't like you much, do they?" she said one afternoon, tilting her head as though listening to an invisible truth. Danielle smiled faintly. "They'll get used to me." "No," Lily replied, her voice soft but certain. "They'll test you first." The test came sooner than either expected. On a Tuesday morning, Danielle arrived to find the breakfast table half cleared and Lily sitting alone, her cane resting against the chair. The staff usually helped her navigate the dining hall, but no one was in sight. "Where's everyone?" Danielle asked. Lily lifted her chin. "They said there was a staff meeting." "Did they tell you?" "No. It was subtle sabotage. Leave the blind girl unattended. Let the new aide take the blame for being late." Danielle understood that kind of cruelty. She'd seen it in smaller, meaner forms all her life. She guided Lily to the kitchen herself and poured her coffee. Moments later, Megan entered, clipboard in hand, smile stretched tight. "Ah, there you are," she said. "We were beginning to wonder if you planned to show up at all." Danielle didn't flinch. "I was here, taking care of Miss Hale." "How sweet," Megan said, her tone slicing through the air. "But we have schedules for a reason. You can't just improvise around management protocols." Lily turned toward the sound of her voice. "Is it protocol to leave a guest alone in an empty room?" The question hung like a challenge. Megan blinked. "Of course not, Miss Hale. I was simply—" "Good," Lily interrupted. "Then it won't happen again." Danielle said nothing. She didn't need to. In that brief exchange, she saw the quiet strength beneath Lily's soft-spoken exterior. Blind, yes, but never powerless. Later that day, as Danielle accompanied Lily to her music therapy session, she asked, "You always speak up like that?" "Not always," Lily said with a small laugh. "Only when someone forgets, I can hear." By the end of the week, Danielle had learned the rhythm of the Hale household. It wasn't the grandeur that impressed her. It was the order. Every move was recorded, every task logged into a digital system. Even kindness seemed to require authorization. Richard Hale rarely appeared during the day. When he did, he carried the kind of quiet that fills a room before words even arrive. There was gravity in his voice, the kind that made people stand straighter without realizing it. Danielle respected him, but she didn't fear him. He wasn't cruel, just careful. A man who had learned to measure his empathy like stock prices. One evening, as Lily practiced piano in the corner of the study, Richard approached Danielle. "You've done well," he said, leaning on the back of a chair. "Thank you, sir. She's happier. I can tell." Danielle smiled. "She just needs people who listen." "Listening is easy," he said quietly. "Understanding costs more." He walked away before she could ask what he meant. But those words stayed with her for days. The next challenge came wrapped in celebration. Richard's company, Hale Industries, was hosting a charity gala at the downtown hotel. The event marked 20 years since the company's founding, a night for donors, politicians, and the kind of people who measured kindness by how many names they could put on a marble wall. Lily was to attend as guest of honor. Danielle's job was to ensure she navigated safely through the chaos of lights, cameras, and crowds. Easy enough, she thought, until she saw Megan's name on the event roster as floor coordinator. The ballroom shimmered that night, chandeliers spilling golden light across polished floors. Musicians played soft jazz as servers floated between tables carrying champagne flutes. Danielle stood beside Lily, feeling the weight of curious eyes. The staff had dressed her in a black formal gown to blend in with the elite, but she still felt like an imposter in borrowed confidence. "Smile," Lily whispered. "You look like you're walking into a test." Danielle laughed under her breath. "I probably am." Megan appeared moments later, clipboard clutched to her chest. "Ms. Parker, please make sure Miss Hale remains near the family section. No wandering off this time." Danielle's brow furrowed. "I don't recall wandering." Megan's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course not. Just a friendly reminder." By 10 o'clock, the speeches had begun. Richard Hale took the stage, voice calm and commanding. He spoke about resilience, innovation, and the privilege of service. But as he spoke, his gaze drifted toward the edge of the stage, toward Lily and the woman standing quietly at her side. "This company," he said, "was built on more than ambition. It was built on faith that decency still matters in a world addicted to power." His words were meant for the crowd, but somehow they found Danielle, and for the first time she saw something in him beyond wealth, a tired hope that decency could still be found. After the applause faded, Danielle escorted Lily to a quieter hallway near the garden terrace. Lily exhaled in relief. "Crowds are exhausting. Even for people who can see," Danielle said gently. "I could feel them staring," Lily murmured. "Not at me, at you," Danielle froze. "At me?" "Yes," Lily said. "You don't realize how loud envy sounds." Before Danielle could reply, a voice echoed behind them. "Miss Hale, the press is requesting a few photos." It was Megan again, smiling thinly. "Miss Parker, you can wait inside." Lily's hand tightened on Danielle's arm. "She stays. That's not standard procedure," Megan said. Lily tilted her head. "Neither is rudeness." Megan's face stiffened, but she turned on her heel and stalked away. Danielle exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Lily said simply. Back inside the ballroom, a journalist approached Richard for a quick comment. The conversation was routine until the reporter, unaware of boundaries, asked, "Is it true your daughter's new aide was once a cafe worker?" The question hung like a dropped glass. Cameras flashed. Richard's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said evenly. "And she's more capable than half the people who've ever worked for me." It was a small moment, but by morning, headlines spun it into something bigger. Billionaire defends working-class caregiver. Social media praised the humility. Critics called it PR. But inside the Hale home, it meant something else entirely. Respect had found its voice. A week later, Danielle was reviewing Lily's medication schedule when she heard Megan's voice from the corridor. She wasn't whispering. She wanted to be heard. It's only a matter of time before she oversteps. People like her always do. Danielle didn't confront her. She didn't need to. Lily, listening from the couch, said quietly, "People like her? Meaning what?" "It means you scare them," Danielle said. "No," Lily replied, smiling faintly. "It means you remind them what kindness looks like." And in that moment, something unspoken shifted between them. Trust, deeper than employment, the kind that doesn't come from contracts or titles. That evening, as the city lights flickered outside and Lily practiced piano, Richard entered quietly. "She's improving," Danielle said. "She always does when someone believes in her," he replied. He hesitated, watching the two of them together, then added, "For years everyone treated her blindness like a weakness." "You treat it like detail," Danielle smiled. "It's not what she can't see that matters, sir. It's what everyone else refuses to." Richard studied her for a moment longer, as though seeing something he hadn't noticed before, a quiet strength that didn't need armor. And though he didn't say it aloud, the thought settled in his mind like a secret. This woman was changing his world, one act of decency at a time. A cold drizzle rolled across the city the morning the trouble began. Danielle arrived early, umbrella dripping, heart steady. She'd grown used to the quiet hostility, the forced politeness that came with being the billionaire's aide. But today, the air felt heavier. Something in the way people whispered told her she was walking into a plan already in motion. Inside the mansion, Lily was cheerful, humming as she prepared for her day. "You ever feel like the air changes before bad things happen?" she asked, half joking. Danielle smiled faintly. "You mean when people start acting nice all of a sudden?" "Exactly," Lily said. "That's when you know they're building something behind your back." By noon, the house buzzed with preparations for an investor showcase at Hale Industries' main headquarters. The event was meant to present the company's new tech fund, a project Richard had spent years refining. Lily wanted to attend. Richard hesitated but relented when Danielle promised to keep her safe. Megan was there, of course, clipboard in hand, lips painted with victory red. She'd been put in charge of coordinating staff for the event, a decision Danielle quietly suspected wasn't accidental. "We'll be expecting you and Miss Hale by 5, Megan said smoothly. "Please remember to dress appropriately for a corporate setting." "No improvisations this time," Danielle only nodded. She'd learned that silence used properly could hit harder than words. That evening, the headquarters gleamed like a temple of glass and steel. Guests arrived in chauffeured cars. Reporters waited near the entrance, hoping for a glimpse of the elusive billionaire and his daughter. Danielle guided Lily through the lobby, past a cascade of cameras. "Keep close," she whispered. Lily gripped her hand tighter. Everything ran smoothly, too smoothly. Megan appeared beside the press table, chatting with a cluster of investors. When she caught Danielle's eye, she smiled, slow and deliberate, like someone counting down to something. Danielle ignored it. Inside the main conference hall, Lily sat beside her father on stage while Richard delivered his keynote. Danielle stood behind them, scanning the crowd as security had instructed. She didn't notice the 2 catering staff near the projection booth exchanging glances. She didn't see the folder one of them slipped beneath the podium. She only saw the moment Megan leaned into an investor's ear and whispered something that made him frown. Half an hour later, chaos broke through calm. The giant screen behind Richard flickered, then changed. Instead of charts and forecasts, the feed displayed a document, an internal email chain leaking sensitive project data, budget discrepancies, private notes. The audience gasped. Phones came out instantly. Cameras clicked. Richard froze mid-sentence, staring at the glowing screen that now broadcast confidential numbers in bold. Security scrambled to shut it down. Megan raised her hands in feigned panic. "How could this happen?" she cried. "Who had access to the internal files?" A technician muttered, "Only staff with guest clearance for the presentation drive." Megan turned sharply toward the table near the back where Danielle's ID badge lay clipped to her folder. "She was near the control desk earlier," Megan said loudly. "She might have plugged something in." Heads turned. Lily twisted in confusion. "Danielle?" Danielle blinked, stunned. "What? No, security," Megan barked. "Check her device." 2 guards moved fast. Danielle raised her hands, heart racing. "This is a mistake," she said. "I didn't touch the system." But one of the guards already held her tablet, her work device, the one the company had issued when she started. The screen showed an access log stamped 30 minutes ago. Richard stepped down from the stage. "Danielle," he said quietly, disappointment mixing with disbelief. "Tell me the truth." "I swear to you, sir, I didn't open anything." Megan folded her arms. Maybe she didn't need to open it. Maybe she just carried it in. The words sliced through the murmurs. Danielle's throat tightened. "You think I'd betray the people who trusted me?" "I think," Megan said sweetly, "you've been looking for an opportunity to rise faster than you earned." Lily rose abruptly, her voice trembling but fierce. "Stop, she wouldn't do that." The crowd stared. Richard hesitated. "Lily." "She saved me when none of you would even look my way," Lily said. "And now you're accusing her without proof?" Megan smiled, the kind of smile that hides behind false respect. "Miss Hale, I understand your loyalty, but data doesn't lie." Danielle looked around the room, the stares, the judgment, the silent verdict already forming. Every face blurred into the same expression she'd seen her whole life. "You don't belong here." "Sir," she said softly to Richard. "You've known me long enough to know I wouldn't risk your trust." Richard rubbed his forehead, voice low. "I want to believe you, Danielle, I do. But until we verify the breach, you're suspended. Suspended. One word, and the floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Security escorted her toward the exit, cameras following like vultures. She kept her head high, refusing to let humiliation finish what lies had started. Lily called after her, but the guards blocked her path. It's all right, Miss Hale, Danielle said quietly. Truth doesn't need permission to come back. Outside, rain had started again, cold, deliberate, the kind that feels personal. Danielle stood under the awning, clutching her badge. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You were warned not to cross boundaries. Next time, stay in your lane, no name. But she didn't need one. She knew the handwriting of envy even through a screen. She took a deep breath, steady and calm, the way she'd learned in nursing school before emergency drills. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something sharper. Back inside, Richard faced the fallout. The PR team scrambled. The investors whispered. And Megan hovered nearby, pretending to manage the crisis. We'll handle this internally, she assured him. I'll make sure security turns over everything. But Richard's eyes were distant somewhere else. If she's innocent, he murmured, then someone just buried a good woman to hide their own tracks. Later that night, when Lily refused to eat, he sat beside her in silence. You believe her? He asked. I know her, Lily said, and I know a lie when it's afraid of light. He looked toward the rain-soaked windows, thoughtful. Then maybe it's time we see who's really afraid. And with that, the balance began to shift again quietly, invisibly. Because while Megan celebrated her victory, she didn't see the storm already forming behind the calm. The same storm that had once lifted a hotel worker to power was now gathering under the roof of a billionaire's empire, ready to turn every false accusation into a reckoning. Danielle Parker wasn't finished. She was just getting started. The next morning came wrapped in silence. The mansion that usually buzzed with morning staff chatter felt hollow, like everyone was holding their breath. Danielle's absence was a shadow no one spoke of directly, but it hung in every hallway. Lily noticed it immediately. The way Megan's voice carried too easily through the breakfast room, the way the housekeepers avoided eye contact. Where's Danielle? Lily asked, her spoon resting untouched against the bowl. Megan smiled thinly. She's taking some time off, Miss Hale. Company policy during an internal investigation. That's not an answer, Lily said. It's the only one I can give. But Lily wasn't the kind to stop there. As soon as Megan left the room, she turned to Derek Vaughn, who was stationed by the doorway. You saw what happened last night, didn't you? Derek shifted uncomfortably. I did, ma'am. But I'm not authorized to comment. You're authorized to be honest, Lily said firmly. Did Danielle do it? He hesitated. Then quietly, no, ma'am. Not from what I saw. Someone set her up. That was enough. Lily's world might have been dark, but her instincts were sharper than anyone's sight. She called her father's office, demanded an audience, and for the first time in years didn't care if she sounded unreasonable. When Richard entered the study that afternoon, she was waiting, fingers tapping the table in quiet fury. Dad, she said, I want her back. She's under review, he replied calmly. You know the protocol. Protocol? Lily snapped. Protocol is what let that woman humiliate me at your hotel. Protocol is what makes people like Megan hide behind clipboards while good people get crushed. Richard blinked. It wasn't anger that stopped him, it was recognition. She sounded like her mother had once sounded, fearless and unwilling to accept polite injustice. He sat down across from her. You really think Danielle's innocent? I don't think, she said. I know, check the logs. Check the cameras. You have the power to see the truth, you're just afraid of what it'll cost. Her words landed like stones in still water. Richard didn't respond right away. Instead, he called Derek. Pull last night's footage, he ordered. Every angle. And lock the access. By evening, the files were on his desk. It took only 20 minutes of review for the truth to unfold. The catering staff weren't caterers at all, they were temporary hires approved by Megan Clark herself. The security feed showed one of them slipping a flash drive into the presentation console at 6:42 p.m. Danielle hadn't even entered the room until 7:05. Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. She was framed. Yes, sir, Derek said quietly. And if I may, Ms. Clark was seen near the same area minutes before. Richard's voice dropped low. Then she's finished, but Lily shook her head. No, let me handle it. 2 days later, Megan strutted into the office dressed in confidence and perfume, ready for what she thought was another day of pretending control. But this time the air didn't bend around her arrogance. It resisted. Richard and Lily were already in the boardroom. Cameras off, blinds closed. Megan, Richard said evenly, Thank you for coming. Please sit. Of course, sir, she said, lowering herself gracefully into a chair. Any progress on the investigation? Quite a bit, Richard said. We've reviewed the footage. Megan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back. And we found something interesting. The person who approved the catering vendor for the event was you. Her breath hitched. Yes, but... And one of those employees used a stolen company access key to breach the system. That's impossible, she said quickly. I vetted them myself. That's what concerns me. Lily spoke up then, calm and steady. Why were you standing near the projection booth minutes before the presentation? Megan's eyes darted to her. I was checking on the equipment. Funny, Lily said. Because the technician said you told him to take a break. The silence was thick now. Even Megan's polished confidence began to crack under it. I think we're done here, Richard said finally. You'll receive a call from compliance. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending investigation. Her voice rose, sharp and desperate. You're taking her word over mine? Over a blind girl and her maid? That was it. The last line crossed. Lily stood, her voice clear and cutting. She's not my maid. She's the only person who's treated me like a human being in this house. Richard didn't have to say another word. Megan's badge was deactivated before she reached the parking lot. That evening, a car pulled up outside Danielle's apartment. She opened the door to find Lily standing there with Derek behind her. You shouldn't be here, Danielle said, startled. I had to be, Lily said. You're cleared. Dad knows everything. Danielle blinked. What? He saw the truth. You're coming back. For a moment, Danielle couldn't speak. The last 72 hours had been a blur of humiliation, self-doubt, and quiet prayer. And now, just like that, it was over. When she returned to the Hale mansion the next morning, even the walls seemed different. People looked at her with quiet guilt. Some murmured apologies. Some avoided her eyes altogether. Richard met her at the entryway. Miss Parker, he said formally, then softened. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, she said. I do, he replied. Because when power hesitates to defend the innocent, it becomes part of the lie. He gestured toward the study. On the desk sat a new contract. I want you to oversee Lily's transition program personally. We're expanding accessibility services across all Hale facilities. You'll lead it if you'll accept. Danielle stared at the papers, stunned. Sir, I'm not qualified for... You're the most qualified person I know. He interrupted gently. Because you don't just see problems, you fix them. Lily grinned from behind him. Told you he'd come around. Later that night, after the house quieted, Danielle sat alone on the terrace with a cup of tea. The city shimmered below like a field of scattered stars. Richard joined her quietly. I used to think loyalty was built on fear, he said. Turns out it's built on grace. Danielle smiled softly. Grace doesn't come cheap. Neither does trust, he replied. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that says everything words can't. And though neither admitted it aloud, something had shifted, something fragile, human and real. For the first time, Richard Hale wasn't just seeing his daughter's aid. He was seeing the woman who had changed his daughter's world and maybe, just maybe, his own. The week that followed felt like sunlight after a long storm. Danielle had her position back, but more than that, she had something harder to earn in a house like Hale's respect. Lily's laughter returned to the halls. Even the staff, once careful to keep their distance, greeted her with cautious warmth. But peace, Danielle learned long ago, was rarely permanent. It was the quiet before the next test. She threw herself into her new responsibility, leading the Hale Accessibility Initiative. It meant long hours in offices she'd once only cleaned, sitting across from executives who didn't know whether to shake her hand or wait for permission. It meant turning a billionaire's promise into policy. And every step of it made Megan's old allies whisper louder. Richard noticed the tension but didn't interfere. He watched Danielle's approach, the calm precision, the way she never raised her voice yet never surrendered ground. She was rebuilding trust inside a machine that had forgotten how to care, and he respected that, perhaps even envied it. One morning, as Danielle presented her proposal for redesigning the company's hotels to accommodate differently abled guests, an executive interrupted her mid-sentence. You're suggesting we remodel our top-tier suites for accessibility? That'll cost millions. Danielle didn't flinch. It'll cost more to keep ignoring the people who can afford to stay there but can't reach the door. The room went still. Even Richard smiled faintly. The executive cleared his throat and sat down. After the meeting, Richard caught up with her in the corridor. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Your daughter?" she teased. He shook his head slowly. "Myself. Before I learned how easy it is to stop fighting." Danielle looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe it's time you start again." That afternoon, a letter arrived. The return address read Clark & Associates Legal Group. Megan had filed a complaint: wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress. It was thinly veiled revenge, but it had enough legal vocabulary to make trouble. Richard handed the papers to Danielle without expression. "She's not letting go quietly." "She won't win," Danielle said. "I know that," he replied. "But she can still damage reputations. I'd rather end this with proof." "Then let's get it," she said simply. Richard studied her face, trying to understand how someone who had every reason to walk away could still stand beside him like an ally. "You really don't scare easy, do you?" She smiled faintly. "You hired a nurse, sir. We learn to hold steady when everyone else panics." He chuckled, a sound rare enough to make the guards outside glance up in surprise. Then maybe it's time this family stopped panicking. A few days later, Danielle met Robert Kane, the Hale family attorney. A man of few words, silver hair, and a habit of watching people more than speaking to them. "Mr. Hale speaks highly of you," he said as they reviewed the case. "I'm just doing my job," she replied. He gave her a measured look. "No, you're protecting something money can't buy. That's why you're a threat to her." They worked quietly for hours, piecing together digital logs, emails, and security records. By evening, Robert leaned back, satisfied. "We have her. False authorization signatures, deleted correspondence, and unauthorized vendor payments. She'll fold before it reaches court." Danielle exhaled in relief. "So it's over?" He smiled slightly. "Not yet, but the end's already written." Meanwhile, Lily had other plans. She was organizing a charity fundraiser for children with disabilities, a project she'd dreamed of since college, but never had the confidence to lead. "This time," she told Danielle, "I want to be the one doing the helping." "You already are," Danielle said. Lily laughed. "Not like you. I mean big. A gala. Music, sponsors, awareness. Dad thinks it's risky. But I think it's time people see me, not my father's name." Danielle nodded. "Then let's make it happen." The weeks that followed were a blur of planning: vendors, musicians, sponsors. Richard funded it but gave Lily complete creative control. "If it fails," he warned, "I'll take the heat. But if it works," Lily finished for him. "Then we show the world what grace looks like." The night of the fundraiser shimmered with light. Chandeliers glowed against silk drapes. Guests filled the hall: businessmen, artists, even city officials. And right in the middle of it all stood Lily Hale, confident and luminous, hand resting on Danielle's arm as she welcomed every guest by name. The cameras loved her. The crowd adored her. And Richard watched from the balcony, seeing a version of his daughter he'd only ever hoped for. Then, as the speeches began, Lily asked Danielle to join her on stage. Danielle froze. "Lily, this is your night." "Correction," Lily said, grinning. "It's ours." When Danielle stepped into the spotlight, applause erupted. She didn't have a speech prepared, but the words came anyway: calm, honest, true. "Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding the light," she began. "When I met Lily, she was waiting for someone to help her stand. What I didn't realize was that she'd been teaching me how to see, not with eyes but with heart. And this event, this movement, is proof that kindness isn't weakness. It's power with purpose." The crowd rose in applause. Even Richard clapped the hardest, pride softening every line of his face. Later that night, as guests began to leave, he found Danielle on the balcony again, looking out at the city. "You speak like someone who's lived 100 lives," he said. She smiled softly. "Feels like it some days." He studied her a moment longer. "I owe you more than I can ever say." "No," she said quietly. "You owe Lily the chance to keep growing. That's the only repayment I want." For once, the billionaire had no clever reply, only silence, the kind that carried gratitude. The next morning, headlines told the story. Blind Heiress hosts groundbreaking charity for disabled youth. But hidden in the articles were photos no one could stop sharing: Lily's radiant smile, Danielle's quiet poise beside her, and the caption that summed it up best: the helper who helped a family heal. For Megan, still fighting her lost cause through lawyers, it was the worst defeat possible. The world had already chosen who to believe. That evening, Richard found Danielle in the garden, trimming white roses that lined the walkway. "The lawsuit's been dropped," he said. Her attorney withdrew after seeing the evidence. Danielle looked up from the flowers. "I told you truth doesn't need defense. It just needs patience," he nodded slowly. "You've changed this place, Danielle. Not just for Lily, for me too." She laughed softly. "That's a lot of credit for one stubborn nurse." "No," he said gently. "That's a lot of truth from one fearless woman." For a moment neither spoke. The night breeze carried the scent of rain and roses. Lily's piano echoed faintly from the house, a song Danielle had taught her by ear. And somewhere between those notes, between the silence of gratitude and the sound of healing, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not duty, just respect, deep and enduring. The kind built not on wealth but on witness. For the first time in years, Richard Hale felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Peace earned, not purchased. And Danielle Parker, once the woman no one noticed, had become the quiet force that made the powerful remember what humanity looked like. Autumn crept across Chicago in gold and smoke, and with it came a new calm inside the Hale mansion. The scandal had faded, the lawsuits had died quietly, and for the first time in years, Richard Hale's name filled the papers for something good. His company's accessibility reforms were being called revolutionary. His daughter was a symbol of resilience, and Danielle Parker, the once overlooked worker who changed everything, was now at the heart of it all. Yet fame was never her goal. She kept her head down, focusing on schedules, therapy, and meetings that stretched into late evenings. Reporters called, charities wanted interviews, but Danielle turned them all away. "I'm not the story," she told Lily more than once. "You are." Lily never believed that. "You saved my life," she said one morning as Danielle guided her through the garden. "Not just the part where people see me, but the part where I stopped feeling invisible." Danielle smiled. "Funny, that's what you did for me." Their bond had grown into something unspoken, part friendship, part partnership, part mirror. Lily gave Danielle purpose. Danielle gave Lily courage. Together they had rebuilt a world both could finally belong to. Richard watched from the balcony often, quiet and contemplative. He had spent decades surrounded by people who obeyed him, but very few who challenged him to become better. Danielle did it without trying. He admired her restraint, the way she never sought credit, never basked in victory. It unnerved him sometimes how someone who'd been treated so poorly could still carry herself with that much grace. One evening, he joined her in the office after everyone had gone home. Papers covered the desk, new proposals for expanding their inclusion programs. "You know," he said, "the board thinks I'm sentimental for trusting you with so much authority." She looked up. "And what do you think?" "I think they're right," he said with a rare grin. "But sentiment has done more good for this company than profit ever did." Danielle chuckled softly. "That's dangerous talk for a billionaire." "Then maybe I'm finally ready to risk something that matters." Their eyes met, not romantic, not dramatic, just human. Two people who had both seen the worst sides of power and decided to do something gentler with it. The following week, Hale Industries hosted a press conference announcing the nationwide rollout of the new accessibility division. Cameras lined the stage, reporters packed the aisles, and Danielle stood just off-center, letting Richard and Lily take the spotlight. But when Lily finished her speech, she gestured toward her. "None of this would exist without her," Lily said clearly. "She's the reason we're here, the reason my father remembered what compassion looks like." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous, unstoppable, the kind that breaks through pretense. Reporters shouted her name. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Danielle blinked under the light, unprepared for it all. Richard stepped forward, laid a steady hand on her shoulder, and said simply, "Meet the woman who reminded us how to see." That photo, his hand on her shoulder, her modest smile made front pages across the country by morning. From cafe worker to catalyst, the woman who changed Hale Industries. But Danielle didn't read it. She was already back at work by dawn, fixing schedules and answering calls. One night, weeks later, she found Richard in the study, staring at an old family photograph, his late wife holding a toddler Lily on her lap. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. She used to tell me I'd forget how to feel if someone didn't come along and shake me awake. Danielle hesitated. Then I'm glad I did. He smiled faintly. I didn't mean just the company. I meant me. For the first time, she didn't deflect with a joke or polite silence. Then maybe it's time you stop running your heart like a business. That earned a small laugh from him, the kind that sounded like surprise at his own vulnerability. You've turned my own words against me. No, she said softly. I've just repeated what you taught yourself to forget. By December, the initiative was thriving. Former staff members who had once ignored Lily now volunteered at her foundation. The public saw it as redemption. Danielle saw it as restoration. Change didn't erase pain, it repurposed it. At the charity's end-of-year dinner, she stood in the back as the crowd toasted Richard and Lily. They didn't call her to the stage this time, and she was fine with that. She slipped out onto the balcony, letting the cold air wash away the noise. Richard found her there minutes later. Avoiding the spotlight again? Someone has to make sure the lights stay on, she said, smiling. He handed her a small velvet box. Don't panic. It's not jewelry. Inside was a gold-trimmed name badge engraved, Danielle Parker, Director, Human Initiatives. She stared at it, speechless. You've been leading this place for months, he said. Might as well make it official. Her throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Then don't, just promise me one thing, never change the way you walk into a room. People straighten up when they see you, and it's not because of the title. She closed the box slowly. You sure you're ready for a woman like me on the executive floor? I'm not, he admitted. But the company is. They both laughed quietly. The kind of laughter that comes when walls finally fall between people who've earned each other's respect. Later that night, when the mansion was quiet again, Lily called from upstairs. Danielle? Yes? Do you ever regret helping me that first day in the restaurant? Never, Danielle said. That moment changed everything. For me too, Lily replied. Because when you took my hand, I realized something. It wasn't just help. It was hope. And that's rarer than sight. Danielle stood there in the dim hall, eyes stinging, a smile tugging at her lips. Then we'll keep it alive, okay? Hope doesn't retire. Lily laughed. Promise? Promise. The story that began with a simple act of kindness had become something larger, a mirror reflecting what humanity still owed itself. In a world that measured worth by wealth, a woman with nothing but decency had rewritten what power meant. She hadn't just caught a billionaire's heart. She had mended it, reshaped it, and reminded everyone watching that greatness isn't inherited, it's chosen, one humble act at a time. And for Danielle Parker, the girl once ignored in a crowded dining room, that was all the legacy she ever needed. Winter laid its quiet hand on the city. The Hale mansion, now draped in soft light and evergreen garlands, looked less like the fortress it once was, and more like a home rediscovering its warmth. Every hallway carried a hum of life volunteers, aides, and young interns working under Danielle's new division. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was a mission with doors open wider than they'd ever been. But progress, Danielle knew, always left echoes. The world praised the transformation, yet inside the corporate core, there were still those who grumbled and private executives who saw reform as weakness, who resented how a former barista now had the CEO's ear. They smiled to her face, but their words behind closed doors were knives wrapped in politeness. She heard the murmurs, of course. She's a charity mascot. She's got him wrapped around her finger. She doesn't belong in strategy meetings. She didn't respond. She just worked harder, letting results do what explanations never could. Richard saw the strain. Late one evening, as Danielle reviewed staff evaluations in the office, he leaned against the doorway. You're here again after midnight, he said softly. She didn't look up. Paperwork doesn't sleep. He stepped inside, setting down a cup of tea beside her. Neither do people who are running from something. That made her pause. I'm not running, he smiled faintly. Then you're chasing something. Justice, she said without hesitation. For people like me, like Lily, the ones who get looked through instead of at. He nodded, quiet pride flickering behind his eyes. You've built something I could never buy. You built the foundation, she said. No, he replied. I built walls. You turned them into windows. A few days later, the foundation's Chicago branch hosted an open day, inviting families with special needs children to explore new educational tools and accessibility technology. Danielle stood at the entrance, greeting guests, guiding parents, helping children explore voice-assisted devices. It was chaos, but the good kind, the kind that fills silence with purpose. Halfway through the event, she noticed a woman lingering near the entrance, hesitant and small in posture. Her coat was worn, her shoes thin. A boy stood beside her, no older than 10, holding a white cane. Danielle approached gently. "Welcome. Is this your first time here?" The woman nodded. "I wasn't sure if we could come. These places aren't for people like us." Danielle knelt down to meet the boy's level. "What's your name?" "Eli," he said softly. "Well, Eli," she smiled, "today this place belongs to you." She guided them inside, introduced them to the staff, and within minutes the boy was smiling, running his fingers across a braille keyboard. The mother's eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." Danielle smiled, remembering another lifetime, another ignored voice at a restaurant table. "I do," she said. "More than you think." Later that afternoon, Richard arrived unexpectedly. He walked through the bustling room, unnoticed at first, and watched Danielle as she comforted a nervous parent. There was no pretense in her tone, no performance. Just sincerity, the rarest kind of power. When she finally noticed him, she wiped her hands and approached. "Didn't expect you here, sir." "I wanted to see what hope looks like when it's working," he said. "You built it," she teased. "No," he said with a smile. "You made it believable." For a long moment he just stood there watching the children laugh. "I used to think success was about control," he said quietly. "But maybe it's about letting go, trusting the right people to carry your name further than you ever could." Danielle looked around the room, then back at him. "You didn't just let go, Richard. You reached out." That night, after the guests had left and the building had quieted, Danielle walked through the empty halls, turning off lights. When she reached the entrance, she found Lily waiting by the doorway, coat in hand. "You always stay last," Lily said with a grin. "Someone has to make sure everything's locked." "You've been doing that your whole life, haven't you?" "Keeping things safe," Danielle smiled faintly. "And you've been unlocking them." Lily laughed, looping her arm through Danielle's. "Then we make a good team." They stepped outside into the cold. Snow drifted softly across the streetlights, catching in Lily's hair. "You ever think about how one small moment can change everything?" Lily asked. "Every day," Danielle said. "If I hadn't stopped that night at the restaurant, we wouldn't be standing here," Lily nodded. "And Dad would still think kindness is a liability." Danielle laughed gently. "Maybe I should start charging for lessons." "He wouldn't mind," Lily said. "He smiles more now." "That's your doing." Danielle looked up at the sky, snowflakes melting against her eyelashes. "Then maybe I've done enough," Lily frowned. "What do you mean?" "You've both learned to stand on your own. Maybe it's time I step back, let you keep building." Lily shook her head fiercely. "Don't you dare. You're part of this family whether you like it or not." Danielle's chest tightened. Family. She hadn't heard that word spoken to her with that much truth in years. The next morning, Richard found a sealed envelope on his desk. Inside was a letter written in Danielle's careful handwriting. It wasn't a resignation, just a request for a leave of absence. "I need to remember who I was before this story began," she wrote. "Sometimes when we fix things for too long, we forget we were broken once too." He folded the letter slowly, staring at it for a long while. Outside, the city was waking up, unaware that one of its quiet heroes was already planning to disappear for a while. He didn't call her back immediately. He understood. Healing didn't always mean staying it. Sometimes meant stepping away before gratitude turned into dependence. But as he looked around the office, the framed photos of smiling families, the new motto carved into the wall, "Respect begins with recognition," he realized that Danielle's influence wasn't leaving. It was woven into the foundation itself, and he smiled, whispering to the empty room, "Wherever you go, you've already changed everything." Weeks later, in a small community clinic on the city's south side, Danielle started volunteering again. The hours were long, the pay non-existent, but the gratitude was real. She treated elderly patients, comforted single mothers, taught young aides how to listen with their eyes. One day, as she packed up for lunch, the clinic's receptionist handed her a note. "Someone dropped this off for you," she said. It was a simple card embossed with the Hale Industries seal. Inside were just 3 words written in Richard's handwriting: Keep lighting hearts. Danielle smiled to herself, folded the note into her pocket, and went back to work. No cameras, no headlines, no applause. Just the quiet sound of humanity being restored, one kind act at a time. 3 months after Danielle left, the Hale mansion had gone quiet. Richard still ran his empire, but the laughter that used to echo through his house had vanished. Lily kept asking when Danielle would return, and each time Richard said, "When she's ready." Then one cold evening, as snow feathered across the city, his phone buzzed. "Mr. Hale?" He froze. "Danielle?" "It's me," she said softly. "I didn't want to bother you." "You could never bother me," he replied.
"Where are you?"
"Working at a free clinic. It's small, but we're keeping the doors open." He smiled. "Let me guess you're fixing things again." "Trying to," she said. "But we're short on supplies." He didn't hesitate. "I'll send what you need." "Richard, no publicity. Promise me that." "Then it stays between us." 2 days later, a quiet donation kept the clinic alive. Danielle recognized the anonymous wire code and smiled. She sent a note with no address. "The light you left behind still works." When the letter arrived, Lily read it first. "She thanked you again," Richard chuckled. "She'll never stop." "That's because you keep earning it," Lily said. "And you miss her." He didn't deny it. "Maybe I miss who I am when she's around." A few weeks later, Lily visited the clinic unannounced. Danielle nearly dropped a clipboard. "You shouldn't be here alone," she said. "I brought a driver," Lily grinned. "And a sandwich." They sat in the break room, sharing lunch from paper bags. "You look happy," Lily said. "I am," Danielle replied. "This work, it's quiet, real." "But don't you miss us?" "I do. I just needed to remember who I was before everything changed." Lily nodded, then handed her a photo one from the charity gala. "You see this woman?" she said. "She taught me how to be brave. Don't disappear on her." One night, a blizzard cut the city's power. The clinic went dark. Danielle stayed through the storm, wrapping blankets around patients and using flashlights to keep children calm. At dawn, trucks pulled up outside. Workers unloaded generators and heating units. The foreman handed her a note. "You could use a little light." "RH." She laughed, shaking her head. "Stubborn man." The lights came back, and the cheers that followed filled the hall with warmth. A month later, the clinic hosted a fundraiser. No press, no speeches, just neighbors helping neighbors. But when the doors opened, Danielle froze. Richard Hale stood there in a gray coat, smiling. "You promised anonymity," she said. He shrugged. "You said no names attached." "I kept mine in my pocket." They spent the night greeting guests and cleaning tables. When it ended, they stood outside under falling snow. "You shouldn't have come," Danielle said. "I had to," he replied. "You reminded me what kindness looks like when nobody's watching." For a long moment, they just stood there, two people changed by the same act of grace. And when Danielle looked back as she left, Richard was still there in the doorway, smiling, proof that redemption doesn't shout. It stays quietly where love once learned how to see. Spring came, and with it a quiet rhythm. The Parker Wellness Clinic grew beyond its walls, new volunteers, new families, new hope. Every improvement bore Richard's invisible touch. He never asked for credit. He just sent help. Danielle pretended not to notice, but deep down she knew. One day he showed up anyway. "I told Lily I had a meeting," he said, smiling. "She knows. She made me bring this." He handed her an envelope stamped Hale Foundation. Inside, Parker Wellness Initiative, official partnership. Danielle stared. "Richard, this makes us part of your foundation." He nodded. "No, it makes my foundation part of you." She couldn't find words. Gratitude felt too small for what this was. That weekend, Lily arrived carrying clipboards and energy. "I'm volunteering," she said. "Does your father know?" Danielle asked. "He will once he sees the pictures," Lily laughed. The day passed in light and laughter. Parents smiled, children played. For once, work didn't feel like work. When they locked up that night, Lily stood between them, arms linked through theirs. "You two realize you're my favorite people, right?" Danielle smiled. "We'd better be, or we're charging you rent." Richard laughed for the first time in weeks. They looked out over the street, 3 lives once broken, now mended in the same thread. Months later, Hale Industries hosted a conference announcing the initiative's national expansion. For the first time, Danielle was introduced as co-founder. Cameras flashed as she took the stage. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began. "I was just someone who stopped to help when no one else did." But one act of compassion can start a chain that money can't stop. Kindness doesn't need a title, it needs courage. The applause shook the room. Richard, watching from the front row, felt something shift again inside him, an old pride reborn. Not for himself, but for what goodness had built in his name. Afterward, she found him waiting. "You planned this," she said. "I hoped for it," he replied. "You gave me everything," he smiled. "You gave it back." That night, when reporters asked her for one quote, she said, "No one wins alone." Summer bloomed. Lily ran mentorship programs. Richard retired from corporate life. He spent his days at the clinic where no one called him sir. He swept floors, organized shelves, laughed with children. Danielle teased him often. "Never thought I'd see you stocking bandages." He'd grin. "Never thought I'd be this happy doing it." One evening, they sat on the clinic steps watching the sunset. "You ever think about that first day?" he asked. "Every day," she said. "I thought you caught my heart because of Lily," he said quietly. "But you caught it because you reminded me I still had one." She smiled softly. "Then don't lose it again." "I won't," he said. "You made sure of that." By the next year, the story had spread far beyond Chicago. News outlets called it the kindness chain. Danielle never cared for the fame. Her heart stayed in the small clinics with people who couldn't pronounce her name but trusted her anyway. The Parker Wellness Initiative had grown into 5 states. Every office carried her motto on the wall: "Respect begins with recognition." Richard had stepped back officially, but he visited often, no entourage, no headlines. Just a man who finally understood what legacy meant. At home, the mansion had changed too. The marble walls now held photographs of volunteers and families instead of awards. During dinner one evening, Lily raised her glass. "To the woman who gave this house a soul," she said. Danielle laughed. "You mean the one who made you do chores?" "Both," Lily said, smiling. After dinner, they sat on the terrace under soft city lights. Richard leaned back. "Funny thing about miracles, they start small." "Usually with someone refusing to look away," Danielle replied. He nodded. "And you never did." Weeks later, Richard announced his full retirement. "Lily and Danielle will lead the foundation," he said to the press. "I'll just follow orders for once." When journalists asked Danielle for a comment, she said simply, "True leadership isn't about being seen, it's about seeing." The quote spread everywhere. But she still spent her mornings at the clinic, sleeves rolled up, helping new nurses find their footing. Months after his retirement, Richard visited the new Hale and Heart Cafe, the restaurant that had once ignored his daughter, now staffed entirely by workers with disabilities. Danielle met him there. "You really turned the past into something beautiful," she said. He smiled. "You taught me how." They sat by the window, coffee cups steaming between them. "You know," he said quietly, "for years I thought I was rescuing people with my money. But I reminded you that people aren't projects," she said. He laughed. Exactly. When she left that day, she turned once to look back. He was still there, framed by sunlight, looking peaceful in a way she'd never seen before. That night, she found a small plaque by the clinic entrance for Danielle Parker, who taught us that seeing with the heart changes everything. She smiled, touched the cool metal, and whispered, "We did it." Outside, the city shimmered. And as she walked home through the hum of night, she carried with her the quiet certainty that kindness, real kindness, never ends where the story does. It lives on quietly in the hearts it once awakened.